And those are the types of local relationships that you can create organically. And I always say when it comes to local press, you're much more effective doing this yourself than hiring a service like mine for something like that.
Interesting. Why do you say? Oh, because you can develop those relationships.
Right. The personal relationships is the most important thing.
Hey, what's up, everybody? And welcome to Masters in Fitness Business Podcast, where you get to stand on the shoulders of giants. And today I have a giant coming from you from the world of PR and press releases. And he lives in Baltimore. His name is Mickie Kennedy. He's written a couple of books. The Beginner's Guide to Writing Powerful Press Releases and Secrets the Pros Use to Command Media Attention. And he is the founder of E-Releases. They've been in business for over 20 years, 22 years, in fact. And he worked in the corporate world, and the price for kind of the starter package for PR and press releases was $20,000. So he decided to kind of go out on his own and help the little guy, the small businesses who couldn't afford, that $20,000 price tag. And so he opened up E-Releases, and he's been very successful, and he's worked with a couple of businesses in the fitness industry and had quite a bit of success. So Mickie, welcome to the show. Did I miss anything?
Nope, you did a great job, Jim. I appreciate it.
Okay, awesome. So PR and press releases, that's something that I'm not familiar with. I'm not sure if any of our guests are familiar with. So my first question is, what's the difference between PR and a press release? I know a press release is part of the PR, but what is entailed in PR?
Yeah, so PR generally encompasses a lot of things, media outreach, public outreach as well. They can be in charge of things like at an organization, brochures if you're a hospital, what posters appear locally around the campus, things like that. But press releases are very specific because they're written for the media. So it's basically a third person written announcement, almost as if it's written by a third party, and then it's sent out to the media with the hopes that they'll turn it into an article. The ultimate goal is not to get the press release replicated on a few sites, which does happen through syndication, but to actually have someone turn it into an article, a feature article, a short blurb, a mention. There's lots of different ways in which it can be sort of translated into earned media.
Okay. So can you walk the listeners through how that works from a breakdown on the press releases?
Right. So the press release is generally a compelling headline, but you want it to be contextual. You want to avoid like the New York Post puns and stuff like that. They work really well for consumers, but for busy journalists, they drill down to review a press release by the headline. So they're not going to click just because it seems sort of clickbaity or something like that.
Okay.
Then the opening paragraph has to really, get the who, what, when, where, and why in there, and what's important about this announcement. You can include additional collateral like multimedia, a video, an image, a logo is a good idea as well, and links to your website or relevant pages to your website. You might be talking about a particular service, and you might want to send them directly to that page to learn more about that. And you also want to keep in mind what your ultimate goal of the release is, what you're wanting the readers to walk away with. So what's interesting, what's compelling, what would a reader or viewer find of interest in here, because that's
Hmm.
the ultimate job of the journalist, is to not figure out what's good for your business, but to figure out what's good for the readers and viewers.
Got it. And then you, before we started recording, I asked you if you'd worked with anybody in the fitness industry, and you said you had on the local level. You want to share that story with the listeners?
Right. So one of our editors, Janelle James, approached me and said, "Hey, I'd like to help out my local gym. It's Core Boot Camps in Bel Air, Maryland." And she said, "I'd like to do a release, but sort of local. It doesn't make sense to send it out nationally." And so we did. And then she was like so surprised. She said, "Oh my God, Baltimore Sun's going to do a feature article on them." And so, I told her, I said, they're looking right now for a lot of positive, heartwarming content. And she wrote the release with that approach when she sent it out, and it got a very favorable response. We were thinking maybe some local county papers or smaller websites would pick it up, but the Baltimore Sun's a really huge, newspaper in the area. So we were very, very pleased to get that pickup.
And did they notice a sizable uptick in traffic through the boot camp?
Well, it just so happens that Maryland's relaxed opening up, so they've seen a big influx in general of people wanting to get back into the gym. So
Okay.
it's hard to predict, other than new member signups, which there have been a considerable amount of those people, wanting to work out and learn about the program.
Okay, good. So, I mean, that's the reason that somebody in the or anybody, any small business would want a press release, just to garner kind of the media attention, so people can read about it and maybe spark an interest, and so they can come in and become members. Correct?
Correct. And, one of the things that I tell a lot of local businesses is you don't really have to spend a lot of money to send out a press release. You can, if you're a small local company, just reach out to local media yourself. It takes a little bit of work to figure out who writes about your industry, but if you look at the publications, you can figure out who that is. Just give them a call to get the email address, or use a service online. There's several of them that'll show you an email address of someone if you have their name and the organization that they're with, and then just send an email introducing yourself. As you have announcements, send something to them. If you have a good tip, like you see a big trend in your industry, but they haven't reported about it locally, you can actually, say, hey, here's a good tip that I thought of that you may want to cover. I'm seeing a lot more interest in it. They appreciate stuff like that. And after a while, they'll return the favor when you do have an announcement about you and say, oh yeah, I remember they helped me out before. And those are the types of local relationships that you can create organically. And I always say, when it comes to local press, you're much more effective doing this yourself than hiring a service like mine for something like that.
Interesting. Why do you say? Oh, because you can develop those relationships.
Right. The personal relationships is the most important thing. In this case, Janelle reached out locally to just a handful of local sources, and the Baltimore Sun was receptive because it was a local story. It was something that was heartwarming at a time where we have a lot of negative news. So they're looking for positive content. So they were very receptive to it, and it worked out really well in that case. That being said, if you're rolling out something nationally or to a broader market, it's really hard to replicate that local experience on a national
Mhm.
level. And that's where a service like e-releases would be really valuable.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thanks for explaining that. That makes a lot of sense. There's a owner, husband, wife owner. They own New York Sport and Fitness up in upstate New York. And they did exactly what you said with the local media. They reached out, established a relationship, and now every time, then they did a kind of a fitness challenge with one of the on-air reporters. So they were in the club with camera crews every week, and then they also, anytime there was a special event like New Year's Eve, or spring into fitness or something, then the local TV station would come down and interview them. So they got a lot of free press just from doing that legwork, like you said. And I think right now, you said something very important. Timing is very important, and right now, with restrictions being eased up, and the weather warming up, people want to get back into the gym. And like you said, with all of this past election year, people are looking for those feel good, kind of heartwarming, positive, upbeat stories. So right now would be a really good time to uh, reach out to the local media around your business and try to establish that relationship and get those press releases, because people are looking. Because I know my club, Catalyst, every new member that we've gotten this month, almost to a person has said they've done nothing since COVID. They just stopped exercising. They stopped working out. And so now the vaccine, the restrictions are being eased, the weather's getting warmer. They're coming in and they want to do something, but in a place that's safe. So timing is everything. So I think now is a really good time to do those press releases, especially for the brick and mortar owners, because they've been hit the hardest without a doubt by COVID, because, I know our membership dropped by 40%, for a year. I mean, it's been tough. I won't lie, so it was nice to see the uptick in business, but, a press release, every little bit helps, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's surprising what, a local story can do. Even your local patch.com, a mention there and a link to you can really drive interest and visibility. People who may know about you and say, oh, I forgot about that company, I should check them
Hmm.
out.
Or, they drive by, they've heard of you, but they're not sure exactly what you're about or what you do. Um, or, so they don't know if, you're the right fit for them. And so an article like that can help them. And then you can also repurpose that article, correct?
Correct. I always recommend that you put your press releases on your website. If you have a newsroom, you can put them there. But if you don't, I always tell people, most people have blogs, put it in your blog if no other place. If that's the easiest to get you started to put your content there, because all of that content on your website is, very search engine friendly. And so search
Hmm.
engines will find you as a result of it. And also, when people are looking around at sites that are very thin, it's hard for them to get a feel for the organization. But if they, visit some of the links on your site and see press releases and content, they're like, oh yeah, this looks like a very reputable place. They're really concerned, about themselves, their image, and they're projecting themselves in a certain way. Uh, that stuff is taken notice, and
Yeah.
people feel a little bit more comfortable, having that additional information.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's a good point because that SEO is so important, and people are always talking about SEO. And I remember back in the day they used to have all these SEO hacks like keywords and things like that. But Google's gotten smarter, so it's things that are relevant, hits to the site, content, the amount of content, how often you post, all of those things play a role in SEO. Correct?
That's correct. And one of the things that works really well is when you issue a release, the syndicated sites that just duplicate your press release doesn't really help you. But if you get a unique article written about you, that does, because that's original content. It's been reworked and rewritten by them, so the search engine sees it as original content, and it helps you even if it doesn't include a link to your website, because the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal rarely link to you. But Google has a patent that a lot of SEO people unearthed a while ago and determined that they actually give you search engine credit if they contextually can tell that this article is about you, even though there's no URL for you. So if someone mentioned e-releases in an article, based on the context of talking about press releases, they'd say, oh, it's ereleases.com. And we're going to give them credit as if there is a link to their website, even though there isn't. And that sort of goes along with what a lot of SEO people saw when they get mentioned in national news, but there was no URL. They know that they were seeing a bump in SEO rankings, and that was the reason.
Nice, nice. And then when you put those articles in your blog, then you can just put links to that on your social media posts instead of posting the entire article, correct?
Correct. It's always a great idea to get them back to your website. Allows you to market to them, remarket to them through pixels and stuff like that. Though that's changing a bit with the iOS and other things that are going on with
Hmm.
the Chrome browsers as well. But it is an opportunity to get them back to you, learn more about you. It's a great way of engaging your followers on social media, and it's just great content because it it helps from a credibility standpoint, largely, whether it's an article on a third party site or just on your site. And if you do get picked up by a local media source, include those links directly to them on your social media as well. Because again, that's like, wow, that let us share in this experience and see this article.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing with that is that when you send them to, when you drive traffic to your website, if your website is set up correctly, then you could capture their lead information if you have a good lead magnet. But also, if you have a good website with, sign up buttons or free sessions or whatever your offer is, the more often more people go to your website, the longer time they spend there, the more likely they're going to hit that sign up button for whatever that offer is. And then, you can book them for an appointment and hopefully become a member. So that driving traffic to the website is so important, as long as your website is set up correctly.
Correct.
Yeah. So what are some of the success stories that you've had with clients as a result of a press release?
Well, it's all over the place. We issued a press release for one client and saved his life. He was actually had come to the U.S. and was seeking asylum from Russia during the Cold War, post-Cold War, and was testifying against some mobsters and such that were over there. And then the U.S. did a turnabout and said, "You've got to be on a plane on Wednesday leaving, and here's your flight number."
Oh,
And he had contacted people over there, and they said, "Yeah, you're gonna be dead within 24 hours of landing." And he had exhausted everything. He had an attorney. There was nothing the attorney could do. He issued a press release, and his local congressperson saw the press release and the articles about it and intervened, and it stopped. And so it was, he said, I literally saved his life. That's like the extreme side of it.
right. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then we had a press release that we did, I think in 2006. So that was a while ago, for a hypoallergenic cat that was genetically modified. And that got Time Magazine Invention of the Year. I'd say like everybody picked it up. New York Times, Washington Post, The Economist, Financial Times, Discover Magazine, both Newsweek and Time, of course, picked it up. But the news wasn't all favorable. It was like, are we playing God? Should we be doing this? Should we be making animals in a laboratory? It didn't matter.
Right.
The company
You got
was
people talking.
overwhelmed with people. They had millions of dollars of people giving them reservations to develop these cats. And it turned out that when it was all said and done, they weren't any more hypoallergenic than just a hairless cat. But for a while there, that was a huge story. And it started with just one release, and hundreds of publications picked it up. Not everybody's that newsworthy. A lot
Right.
of people are just announcing a new product or new service, but they might get some pickup in trade publications. They might get a local newspaper. Sometimes they'll get some national interest. They might get interviewed in a podcast. They might be an industry blog or something like that that's influential. With social media, the landscape's changing a little bit of what media is. And fortunately, the Newswire is accepting of that. They were a little hesitant when blogging started, but now they've embraced it completely. So you're having even social media influencers in certain spaces that are getting press releases and actually covering it in social media. So it's a really exciting time, and there's a lot of different avenues for that to happen. But if you visit my website, ereleases.com, I have customer reviews and case studies, and you can just sort of get a feel for all the different experiences that people are having across all different types of industries. We have a lot of authors. The major publishers themselves have stopped covering their own authors, with the exception of the big names like Stephen King and stuff like that. And they generally give that to a PR firm, high price PR firm. But for the little guys, they're like, you're on your own. So we're seeing a lot of authors that are having to go to a company like us or a PR firm to try and figure out, how do I do this? How do I announce my book to the world? And so it's it's something that you can do yourself through a service like eReleases, and not have to pay tens of thousands of dollars to a PR firm to try and replicate that.
Gotcha. Um, yeah, that's really good. That's really good to know. So obviously, like if you're just doing something local, you want to focus on the local market. But if you're doing something that applies, has a broader application, then you can go national. So let me ask you this. So say me as a business, I come to you for a press release. Is there anything, say, best case scenario gets picked up like the cat, right? The hypoallergenic cat. Is there anything that I need to do on my end to prepare myself so that I am ready for whatever comes out of that, whatever
I think
fruit falls out of that tree?
I mean, I don't think that we've had a few clients that got like 500,000 visitors to their website. That's rare. I think that in most cases, there's usually an uptick in traffic, might be an uptick in sales. There might be more calls and leads. So you just want to make sure that you're not getting ready to go on vacation for 2 weeks right after you issue a press release. I've actually had that happen, where a journalist calls and says, "Look, I've been trying to reach this guy for a week and a half, and I'm not going to do a story with him, but it just makes me think poorly of your service that you'd issue a release with someone who can't be contacted." And then later the person's like, "Oh yeah, I sent the release on a Friday. That Monday I went on vacation for 2 weeks." And so you don't want to do that. You just want to be available. And
Okay.
journalists love a phone number, because if they're ever under the gun, what happens a lot of times is they're getting ready to go to print, and at the last minute, the managing editor says, "I want this clarified. Did you, is this?" And they're like, "Let me contact him and get back to you." And they're like, "Well, let me know. It's going to press at 4." So that's why a phone number is really important. And it doesn't have to be. It could be a Google Voice number. It doesn't have to be, your cell phone number if you're concerned about that getting out there. And the same thing with an email address. It's also a good idea to have that as well.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, to have that contact info and be around and be available so that you can take advantage of the opportunity that you've created for yourself,
Sure.
right?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So you don't miss the boat. Okay. Is there anything else that, the listeners should know about press releases, when to do it, how to do it, any
Yeah.
of those?
Yeah, I have a mastermind class that I created. It's a video training on basically PR strategy, and it
Hmm.
basically breaks down what's working and what has worked for my customers and continues to work. And so I've made that available for free at ereleases.com/plan, PLAN. And I recommend that people start there. The writing of the release, while it's important, once you've looked at a couple of press releases, anybody can do it. I would say spend most of your energy and time on the strategy aspects of it. And I break down what works, what can work. And so there's ways where, if you feel like, I'm a local fitness person and I don't really have anything newsworthy to say, you could do a local survey in your area on fitness, and include a couple of really interesting, quirky little questions as well, because that really excites the media. But you can do that survey yourself. Generally, if you have 100 or more respondents, journalists are okay with it. You can partner with someone to try and you say, hey, I notice you have a large social media following locally. Could I send this survey to your people? And a lot of people are very accepting of stuff like that. But once you get the results back, you can actually draft a release that focuses on that study. And journalists love numbers and statistics, and so they'll probably eat that up. And that's something where if you feel I'm not really newsworthy, that's one way you can approach it and sort of create your own news. And there's several of those strategies in that lesson, that mastermind class.
Nice. And when you say strategy around a press release, what can you say more about that?
Yeah, it's mostly what the press release is about. So many press releases that I issue do nothing. They go out. The media doesn't really do anything with it. They're well written releases, but they're not strategic releases. They're about. I see a lot of corporations that issue releases on a new hire, and unless that new hire was an important person in the industry to begin with, nobody really cares. And
Okay.
I think it's a waste of money to use a service like mine to issue those types of releases. And other types of releases are, you've updated the website or you made a small charitable donation. Everybody started issuing releases after Black Lives Matter saying we've made a donation to BLM. And it's like, there's really nothing that newsworthy there. In that respect, giving money is probably the least newsworthy thing you can do. That being said, if you have a charitable work that you're doing locally and you're participating in a car wash, well, that's an activity, and the media are much more receptive to activity and things like that. So that
To
could work.
events. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Gotcha. So when you say strategy, do you mean like that it's connected to something bigger? It's part of an overall strategy and you're just writing the press release to highlight one part of it?
It can be really piecemeal, and the approach that I take in the master class is there's several things that work, and you need to test them and try some of them and figure out what your industry responds to. The surveys and statistics works really well with almost anyone, so I definitely want to try that. Another approach is being contrarian. Uh, there's always hot button issues that pop up from time to time that are in your industry. And if journalists cover someone, they're usually covering what everyone's saying right now, and they go to a big guy, a big name. So you're not going to get there. But if you're willing to say something completely opposite, but you wanted to do it well reasoned and logical, you don't want to come across as a crazy person.
Right.
But
Just
I always
ranting.
use the
Yeah.
example, if in environmental stuff everybody's going electric, it's a contrarian approach would be, yeah, but there's some real cons with going electric. The mining metals that are used to make the batteries is not environmentally sound, and it's usually done by people who are not given protective wear and stuff like that. And also, we don't have a way to recycle properly these batteries at the end of life. And so those are things that we really should address before we fully embrace electric vehicles. So that's a contrarian viewpoint, but you don't come across as crazy or illogical. It's well reasoned and it makes sense. So, journalists by definition want to be fair and balanced. So they want to have both viewpoints, but rarely do they have both viewpoints because there's nobody sitting there saying, here, take this quote, or here, have this viewpoint. So if you're willing to be that person in your industry or locally, you can actually get on a Rolodex. So when a journalist is doing a story, they say, well, I've got the quote from the company that's announcing this, but I'm looking for someone to say something sort of negative and point out, be the devil's advocate. I can call this guy, and they'll pick up the phone and reach out to you as a source.
Okay, great. And so it's like establishing yourself as a go-to person with the media.
Right.
Yeah. So they're always you're on their radar, so to speak.
Right. And there's other little approaches as well that are part of the strategy. But what we found is that these type of things work time and time again for my customers. And the ones that use them very well get pick up quite often. I have two companies that use statistics, and they do them across different industries, and that's their whole business model. They sell reports and statistics and stuff like that. So they're constantly, and they're really good at coming up with one or two quirky questions that once they put that in the press release or in the headline of an article that gets written, readers are like, yeah, I want to know what percentage of people in my area feel this way about this really strange thing. Or sometimes it's just oddball stuff. And 80% of the survey is regular questions and answers, which is interesting, but it's those little odd ones that you throw in there sometimes that really get people,
Yeah.
pique their interests. And that's something that I've seen. Cosmopolitan magazines, I think created that 40 years ago, where it's like 17% of all men do this in the bedroom, and you're like, I've got to go to page 58 and see what that's about. That works, that curiosity. And so if you can sort of capture some of that and some of that fun originality in a survey, you're going to get picked up and do really well.
Gotcha. Okay. So quirky questions. I like that. Okay. Anything else we need to know?
I think that it's really important that when you try press releases that you commit to a proper campaign. And so I've seen a lot of people do a single press release and then move on thinking it didn't work for them. But you really want to try a minimum 6 press releases. You don't have to do them all at once. You can spread them out over a year. You can, even do quarterly, but, test a different strategy for each. Try the survey one, and if that doesn't work, try something else. If and you can revisit the survey again and say, well, maybe I need to elevate the questions. Maybe I need to partner with someone and get a lot more respondents. Maybe I need to reevaluate it. But I say move on until you test lots of different things, and once you find something that works, see if you can replicate that by changing it slightly and trying a different approach there. And then when you've exhausted that, move on. But in the case of the surveys and statistics, I have two customers that have been doing that now for 8 years, and they're doing 20 surveys a year. And every one they do gets picked up in at least a dozen publications, and sometimes considerably more. And for them, they're going to keep doing that until it stops working, and it doesn't look like it's ever going to stop working.
Okay. So stats and surveys are
Right.
kind of right at the top of the list, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
And they move
Okay.
from industry to industry, which serves them very well, because I think if they were in one industry, it would make it very difficult to just constantly be doing surveys. But if you're a local company, doing an annual survey makes a lot of sense. So, try to strive to maybe do that one once a year, and then test some of these other approaches that might work.
Gotcha. Well, that played right into my next question, because that was my next question, is like, does a single press release really do anything? And I guess it depends on what happens with it, whether it gets picked up. But I think it's better to have several and do it on a regular basis and consistently, because then that way you keep popping up in front of their eyes, the media's eyes, and they're like, oh yeah, I remember that guy. So say if you've got um, like a book release, you're releasing a book along with a online business, what strategy would you recommend for that? And I'm asking for myself.
Okay. Well, there's always the book launch press release. So when you're issuing the book, you could make a press release about it. You want to make it really relevant for the industry. I take it it's nonfiction.
Yes.
Okay, that's
Mhm.
good. Fiction is terrible with press, because fiction works or doesn't work based on the style of writing, and very few reviewers are going to take an unknown person and invest by reading the book to determine if it's got a good style and it's well written. But when it comes to nonfiction, the subject matter is what's really important. What's your take? what is it that you're writing about? What's the uniqueness of this book from everything else that's out there? And that can easily be captured in a press release and conveyed to readers so it can get their interest. And you know, the online store, uh, you know, there's lots of different approaches you can take when it comes to an online website or a store or something like that. You just want to sort of break it down as to what can I say that is interesting to a reader, rather than, you know, what makes this different from everything else. What can I do to elevate or isolate a couple of things that would be really important to share in the press release, so that this would be something that a reporter or journalist would say, yeah, this would make a good article, this would make a good story, as opposed to what happens with a lot of times with local media, especially, is if they get a press release that's not really newsworthy or whatever, they may reply with, here's our rate card for advertising, which is like a big slap in the face that we're not going to do a story, but feel free to advertise with us.
Which makes you immediately want to spend your marketing budget with them. So, if I hired you for this, would you provide insight, strategy, advice, things like that?
We can. We have a higher end service where we do the strategy and develop all that. And we also have a service where you can do it yourself, and we provide some coaching with you and walking you through that process. It's basically like it's a PR campaign of 6 press releases, so it includes the press releases and 6 coaching calls with editors to walk you through the process, help you with the release. Whatever you need, we're there for you. Whatever is the bottleneck for you, and whether it's reviewing the release that you've written, or, you know, going over your strategy and saying, does this sound right? So we do have a package like that as well. The pricing of that varies. The coaching calls and the 6 distributions is $2,999. It's a lot of money for a small business.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to determine if that's going to be a good fit for you. That being said, if you were to go and look at the free training I have on strategy, you can do this yourself and then just use us for distribution only. And we have a new customer special for distribution that starts at $199. I always advise people, if you're a small business, this is the way I ran my small business. I couldn't afford much in the beginning, so I did
Mm-hmm.
everything on the cheap. And so I wouldn't recommend to someone who's new the $3,000 program or the one where we handle everything, because that one starts at $12,000. But there's a lot that you can do yourself with the tools that I put out there, where you can learn the strategy. It tells you how to assess your industry, how to look for blind spots in your industry that might be opportunities to talk about. So I would recommend that, and then try it yourself. If you get, you know, stuck and you need us to write the release, we can do that for you. Or, you know, you can always just send the release to one of our editors and just say, what do you think? And they'll take a look at it. It may take a day turnaround to get back to you, but we would do that at no charge for anybody.
Okay.
We hold people's hands. We recognize that a lot of people that use us, it's their first time using a real press release service, and so we're willing to be there for you, because most of our clients, once they become a customer, use us again and again, and they see the real value of, you know, getting over a proper newswire like PR Newswire.
Okay. Got it. All right. Great stuff, man. Mickie, I'm glad I had you on the show. Very informative. Now I'm excited, kind
Okay.
of.
Well, it's great
So,
talking with you.
yeah, same here. And I always end the show. This is my favorite part of the show. I ask all my guests 3 questions, and it's my favorite part because I feel like we get some of the best info because we get to peek behind the curtain of Mickie. So, Mickie Kennedy. And so, my first question is, what has been your most successful failure? And what I mean by that is that at the time, it seemed like a devastating loss that you weren't going to be able to recover from, but you were able to take life lessons from that propelled you to greater success down the road.
So I would say I had another company when I started e-releases. It was actually email driven, so e-releases sort of was part of that. And I would send out daily content. We had poem a day, horoscopes, yeah, all kinds of different content and stuff like that. And it after the dot-com crash happened around 2000, it 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 just went from $50,000 a month in advertising revenue to zero. And the only thing I had at that time that was providing income was e-releases. It wasn't enough to live off of, but I hadn't focused on it. And so
Right.
I then took all my energy and focused on it. And now it's a business that's doing really well. And I have lots of employees. Well, I have 7 employees. For me, it's a
Mhm.
lot. For someone
Yeah.
who went in business for himself, not to have employees, having 7 is a lot. But
Yes.
it's worked out really well. And so I thought that I was, the end was near, and it just shifted me to focus predominantly on e-releases and grow it into the best product or service that I could offer.
Yeah. And you had that energy of desperation and need behind it. Like, what's the guy, the FUBU guy?
Oh, Damon.
Damon. Yeah. He wrote the book, The Power of Broke. And that's what he talks about, like when you're broke and you got no other options, you figure it out, right? And
Right.
and I tell people, actually, a buddy of mine who's wanting to change jobs, but like if you don't jump into it with both feet, it's never going to become a full-time job.
Right.
Yeah. So you got to jump in with both feet. My next question is, since you've been since you've been dealing with the fitness industry in this capacity, what has been the biggest surprise that you've had to deal with that you did not see coming? And COVID doesn't count.
Right. I would say when it came to fitness, I would say it's still a bit like high school. The popular kids have an easy time. We did a press release for what's his name? The guy from Jersey Shore, Mike Sorrentino.
Oh, the situation.
The situation, and he did a nutritional supplement called Brotrition, and he did a press release through us, and it got picked up in several places, and I'm like, this doesn't deserve it. This is just
Yeah.
a guy who's using his fame. So it just reinforced that the popular kids always have an easy time of it, and
Uh-huh.
the smaller businesses that don't have the fame and fortune behind them, it's a little bit harder to get the media attention, but it does happen. And the journalists want to help. You just have to have that compelling story.
Got it. Got it. What was it called? Brotrition.
Brotrition. And you can look it
That's
up. He got a few articles about it,
that's
more than it
hilarious.
deserved. Yeah.
Yeah, that's hilarious. All right, and and then so how, I guess you just have to write a compelling story, and everything we just talked about. If you're a little
Right.
guy, you don't have a big
Develop.
name or a fame behind
Right.
you, you gotta grind a little bit more.
Yeah. Work on that strategy. That
Yeah,
strategy is going to be the difference between whether you get picked up or not.
got it. Okay. And then my last question is, I'm big on personal and professional development. So where do you go for your personal and professional development?
Well, I belong to the Entrepreneurs Organization (EO). I belong to the Baltimore chapter, and that's it. I have a group of people that we sort of have, masterminds or hot seats, and we talk about each other's business, and that's been very valuable for me to have someone I can share with. They're all small business owners. They're all successful small business owners, and they're local to me, and you get to know them, and they get to ask the hard questions and help you through areas that they may have experienced themselves, or have a story that's relevant to your experience, and that's been really valuable for me.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in masterminds because when you're in a mastermind, you can have higher level conversations about your business because they understand, like, they have a base of knowledge, so you can build on that. And another thing that I found that's nice about masterminds is you always have somebody who's ahead of you and somebody who's slightly behind you, so you can develop kind of mentors and then also mentor other people, which is also tremendously helpful and can help create some insights for you as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, Mickie, thanks for coming on the show. I'd like to reserve the right to have you back on if possible.
Absolutely. I had a
Yeah.
great
Awesome.
time.
Good. Same here. Same here. Well, have fun in Maryland. I've only been to Maryland once, and that was down on the harbor. We were at that Pier One hotel or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Definitely
very
harbor.
nice hotel. I was down there for a couple of Thomas Plummer workshops. But yeah, this has been great, man. I really appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Take care.
All right, man. And all of those links to contact. Oh yeah, let's talk about that. Where can people go to get in touch with you, find out more, view your mastermind video?
Okay. Ereleases.com is the main website. And to view the mastermind, the videos training, ereleases.com/plan, PLAN. And it's also on the footer of the website, PR strategy training. And there's also press release samples there if you want to look at the types of, what a press release looks like and sort of, get a sense whether you could draft it yourself.
Got it. Got it. And all those links will be in the show notes. Go to trainerjim.net, click on this episode of the podcast, and all the links to contact Mickie and get the free training on developing your own press release strategy will be right there. So again, Mickie, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you.